Welcome to From Heartache to Healing and Hope with your host, Bernadette Winters Bell, LMSW. This podcast explores the many layers of life through the lens of loss and grief, often with special guests who share their perspectives on this universal yet unique process. These explorations can offer you, the listener, avenues to encourage you to have these conversations with yourself, your family, your community, your world.
I'm Bernadette Winters Bell, your host of the podcast From Heartache to Healing and Hope. And in this series, same storm, different boats, I have somebody wonderful for you to really experience, Mary Connick. She's a nurse up from Rochester, New York, and many interesting evolutions that she's been through during this pandemic and her wonderful joy and creativity of her photography. I think you're going to really enjoy it on the podcast From Heartache to Healing and Hope. Your host, Bernadette Winters Bell, welcoming you to join us. See you soon. Hello, I'm Bernadette Winters Bell, your host of the podcast From Heartache to Healing and Hope. And in this series, same storm, different boats. Wait till you meet my guest today. Welcome, Mary Connick.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I bet of the two of us, Mary, you're the one that knows you the best. So why don't you introduce yourself to my audience?
Hi, my name's Mary Connick. I have been a nurse for 15 years. I live in Rochester, New York at the moment. And I am a newly aspiring photographer and grew up in New York City and slowly have moved my way up to almost Canada now.
Oh, you're getting there.
I figure by the time I retire, I'll be in Canada. Every 20 years, I move closer.
Was that your goal from the beginning, or it's just happening?
Yeah, no, it's just happening.
Terrific. What age were you when you left New York City?
I left New York City when I was 17 and moved to Oneonta.
People usually do the opposite, I think.
I received my bachelor's degree at Oneonta and then stayed for about 20 years when I graduated. I really love the area. Yeah. I went back to school and became a nurse while living in Oneonta.
Wonderful. So you got your RN while you were here?
I did. I received my bachelor's in English and women's studies, and I was working at group homes while I lived in Oneonta and was going to college. When I graduated from college, they offered me a full-time job, and I really didn't want to move back to New York City by that point. Right. So I took the full-time job at the group home, and one thing led to another. A few years later, I decided to go to nursing school.
Beautiful. Where'd you go? Delhi, Hartwick?
I actually went to Morrisville.
Ah, nice.
To SUNY Morrisville. So I got my associate's degree in nursing. And that was over 15 years ago now. I can't even believe that.
It's funny when we start to talk about ourselves and we have, years like that. We're like, well, it's just a couple of years ago. Oh yeah, that's right. That was 12. Yeah, right.
Right. Like I'm not a new nurse anymore.
Right. Wow. So, were you working in a hospital after you graduated or a nursing home?
I did. I kind of went to nursing school with the intention of going back to the group homes. And then while I was in school, and I think a lot of nurses will tell you this, you go into nursing school thinking, I'm going to be a pediatric nurse. And then you come out something completely different that you weren't even expecting. And that's kind of what happened to me. I found a love of the OR. I did an internship in the operating room. And then in the course of that internship program, they let me shadow in other places. And I ended up shadowing in dialysis for a day and immediately fell in love with it. So when I graduated, I did my obligatory year of med surge. They encourage all new nurses to do that, and it is good practice. But on my 1-year anniversary, I transferred to the dialysis unit and have been there ever since.
Wow. So you did that here in Oneonta?
Yeah, in Cooperstown. Yeah.
Right.
I started my career at Bassett in Cooperstown, and it was great. I was there for 10 years, got tons of experience, worked in all different aspects of dialysis, and loved it. I found my niche. I liked the technical, and this is funny because it kind of, I think, reflects this inner battle that I've always had with myself. So I really liked the operating room because it was very technical. Your patient comes in, you do your job, the patient leaves, a lot of equipment and science, and science. But your patient comes in anesthetized and leaves anesthetized. You don't really get to talk and have that personal connection with them, which is why I ended up loving dialysis. It's very technical, very mechanical, but like the OR, but you get to form those relationships with your patients. So it was the happy medium for me, but I've always battled with that myself, the science versus the creative part of myself.
Just having that conversation earlier today about balancing those two things. I've always loved ice skating. I've been watching it since, I don't know, forever. And it's because of that. I love the real amount of work that they put into it and how hard those are, the science of doing
technical. Yeah.
But the beauty,
beautiful,
and the creativity and the music. So I love that you love that marriage of those two things. Absolutely.
Yes, and I've struggled with that my whole life. I went through a phase where I was all about, music and creativity, and, the science part of me suffered. And I've never found a good way to marry the two. I always felt like I had to be one or the other. I had to be the science nurse, or I could be the creative, hippie type. I battled with that a lot, my whole life.
Why you would, because we don't live in a culture that supports having both of those things.
Right.
Either they want you to use the left side of your brain or the right side of your brain.
Right.
Something mushed in the middle, that's what they think of it as mush.
Unfocused.
Right. But in truth, I think we're more balanced as a holistic human being if we have some of both,
Right.
So, I mean, this is probably rare, but if someone was an accountant by day and a painter by night.
Dance musician at night.
Exactly. I think what makes us a little bit more whole than just one thing or the other. Wow.
Yeah. And it's really within the last year that I feel like I've managed to finally do that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah.
It took a lot of big moves and work, but people ask me how my COVID's been going, and I know that's something you talk about, like how has your war been? How's my COVID been?
So how's your COVID been, Mary?
It really has been cathartic for me, and I talk to my mom all the time, and she always says she feels so upset for me and my brother, because we're not traveling like we usually do, and she feels like we're missing out. And I keep telling her this past probably 6 months have been the happiest I've felt in years.
Wow. And why is that?
I made a big career move this fall, which was really hard for me to do, but very, very needed for my mental and physical health. And again, I was caught up in, I have to do this. I'm in a leadership position, keep pushing. And I just was not listening to myself. I had lost myself. And it took a lot to to walk away from that. I had kind of worked myself up in my career over the last 15 years into this sort of high performance leadership position. And it was hard. It was hard to walk away from that and not feel like I was letting people down, letting myself down, taking a step backwards in my career.
Sure.
And it really was a fantastic move. I found a really great niche with a great team, that I've been able to find that balance that we were talking about before.
And that's one of the, if I can call it this, the gifts of the pandemic, which for many people, there are no gifts or haven't felt
Right.
it. I completely understand that. If you have a loved one that died, what I'm talking about sounds ridiculous. But always when there's difficult times, there's good things that come out of it. And so one of the things is that if something happens in our life completely unexpected that turns our whole life upside down, like we've all experienced unexpectedly, then you begin to have thoughts like, well, things could change all of a sudden. And it could be hard. No, it will be hard. But I could try it. What's the worst that could happen? I'll do something else. Right. So, when we have a loss, because that's the field I work in, or a trauma or both, as this has been for so many of us, it becomes the worst is kind of already happened. So why not try? Right. And when we put aside our brain, which, we all spend, as far as I'm concerned, too much time in, and stop overthinking it or talking ourselves out of it. And when we lead with our heart and spirit and know, okay, that tells me that's what I've been working towards and what everyone expects out of me and what I should do.
Right.
This tells me, as good as those facts are, there's something better there for you so that it all works together. Right. I'm so glad that worked for you. Are you still in the medical field?
Yes. Yep. And I'm still actually working with kidney patients. I'm working as a case manager now. So I'm really back to
working with the people.
Yeah. And it was what I needed, and it's where I needed to be. The photography definitely has played a huge part in my last year or so with really trying to bring me back. I keep saying bring me back to me, but I really had felt like I lost myself.
Well, I think that's actually
for a long time. Like it got to the point I was really grieving myself. Does that make sense?
It makes all the sense. Well, you're talking to the person who really believes it makes sense.
Right.
The truth is that we push ourselves and push ourselves and push ourselves to a point that when we look in the mirror or reflect, we're not quite sure who we're seeing. We may look like we expect to see, but
right.
maybe we're acting or speaking or thinking in ways that no longer this doesn't connect with this at all. Right. I mean, often there's a disconnect during losses and traumas, disconnect between the head and the heart. But when we push ourselves so far out, it's almost like they're on two different bodies.
Yes. I felt like that quite often. I felt like, and this is, may sound strange, but like I often felt myself outside of me. Right. Like looking at me going, what the heck? Like, what is this?
Think about if we're sold, say a bill of goods, I'll call it, that if we study and do this and then move up to this and this and this, and that's where success is.
Yes.
Whatever that is, financial, status-wise, titles, whatever it is.
Yes.
That's what we are wanting to do, what we're told we should do. This is the path.
It's the natural progression.
Right. And just because you're good at this doesn't mean you get promoted or take a job here, you're going to be good at this. That's one of the fallacies. But another one is when you get here and then it's like, is this all there is? Yeah, I can hear Peggy Lee now, an old song singing in the back of my head. And so that you say, wait a minute. Maybe That's how it is for some people. Okay. I'm not finding that's for me. So when we separate ourselves from you should do that progression, then we can listen to our heart and our spirit and maybe
Yes,
get a truer voice.
and a lot of it, like even the photography was kind of forced at first. Like I was forcing myself to do it as a coping mechanism to deal with the stress of my everyday life.
Wow.
And
you've always been interested in?
yeah, it was originally what I was going to go to college for, when I was 17. And then, like I said, I went the science route and nursing and then leadership and, all that kind of stuff just fell to the wayside. And I was really stressed and anxious and planning, and I was responsible for a lot of patients and a lot of staff, and I found ways to tell myself that like I took lots of trips, and my friends would, oh, you're so lucky you get to go away so often. But in my head it was just like I just need to escape from my life. By the time I got there and started to feel a little relief, it was time to come home again, and then I just kept going. And same thing with the photography. I kind of forced myself into it. Like I was going for walks at night after work. And there was a night where I got home and realized I had no idea where I had been. I was in my head the entire time, still stressing, still thinking about work and planning and, and got home and was like, I just walked for half an hour and I have no idea where I went. And that was kind of what led me into the photography again was, I'm just going to bring my camera with me and it'll force me to be present where I am and looking around. And it just turned into a coping mechanism. And now, since getting this new job and, having my headspace back to myself, now it's just really become super enjoyable, and I've been having a great time with it.
Do you have particular subjects you like taking pictures of, or like landscapes or people, or what do you like?
Sure. At first, it was just trying to figure out how to use a camera again. I do not really enjoy taking portraits of people. And I think that's probably because I'm working so closely with people all day. I enjoy finding patterns in things. I seem to take a lot of photos that people can't figure out what they're of.
Oh, do you like that?
Yeah. So I'll take a picture of a pattern in something. I've been working on a lot of double exposures lately where I'll take two of my photos and blend them together.
Nice.
And
I'm thinking now as you're talking of leaves or ice or things that would be interesting that you might see on a walk, Yeah.
I do love being by the water, and, most of the vacations and traveling that I've done have been to places with water, and Rochester is right on one of the Great Lakes on Lake Ontario. So this summer I took up paddle boarding.
Fun.
And I really enjoy being by water, and obviously I have my camera with me. So a lot of my photos are of.
Beautiful. It's so restorative. The water even just is sometimes on the way home when I'm trying to transition from professional to personal. My drive's only like 20, 30 minutes. But I'll go get a cup of tea, cup of coffee, cup of something, and find water. It only has to be a little bigger than a puddle. I'm very not particular. Of course, I don't want to drive so far. And that's my processing time to transfer from one person, part of me, to another. And just those few minutes, sometimes it's when I call a friend and I'll say, I've got 12 minutes. How you doing?
Yeah. Talk fast.
Just tell me a little bit and we'll enjoy.
Right.
But being by the water brings it right down.
Very,
That's lovely. That's
very
wonderful.
much so for me.
So what are you doing with the pictures? Are you printing them or what are you doing?
Yeah, I when I first started really getting back, like I said, it kind of just started with me like, okay, like taking pictures with my phone while I was walking at night just to try to make myself present. Then I, would get home and a couple of them I'd be like, oh, wow, that's actually a pretty good picture. So I ended up buying a camera again, which, now the digital world is completely different than what I was shooting with back in high school. So I decided they offered a community class in a nearby town. His name's Jim DeLuz, and he's kind of become a mentor of mine. And I took a community class with him, and they were offered on Saturdays, and I was traveling a lot at the time. I had trips planned, every 5 weeks or so. So I asked him if I could just meet with him independently since I wouldn't be able to make a lot of these classes. And we just kind of, formed a friendship, and he owned a place in this town called the Photography Co-op. And I ended up doing 2 shows there.
Showing your work?
Yeah, showing my work, which was awesome. It was, again, this happened. I actually delivered my photos framed to the co-op about a week before COVID really started. So about a year ago now, this time.
Wow, timing's very important. Good job.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we weren't able to do the artist reception and everything like that because of COVID, but he managed to keep the gallery open this year. Now he had to close it now because it couldn't survive with the current climate. But it was great to be able to do those 2 shows, and it just really gave me. I sold my first photo at the gallery, so I call myself a professional photographer now because I sold 1 photo. But I love it.
2 shows and you've had a sale. So that's all excellent. I mean, even just to walk into a place or see pictures of your show must be like, oh wow, I did that. That's terrific. Yeah.
It's really great. And I think in the fall I may be showing at another gallery nearby here, just as with a bunch of different artists, and it's just fun. Like I said, it's nice, even being by the water too. These were all the traveling, the being near the water, the photography. These were all things that I kind of forced myself to do as these coping mechanisms to just make it through.
That's right.
The stress of my everyday life. And all of these things now in the last, well, with the exception of traveling because of COVID, but, going up to the water and doing my photography and even just, talking with friends, I feel so much more present now when doing these things, and it's just actually enjoyable. It doesn't feel like something I'm making myself do just to get through the day.
So before, you were kind of trying to hang on to your sanity and use photography to allow that to happen because you're in such a high pressure position. And now you're present in your life in so many different aspects. That's absolutely wonderful. Wow.
And it's been interesting to see how the photography has changed too, since, I'll look back and see some of the photos that, that I was taking a year ago. And now, I just had some of my photos printed by my friend Jim the other day. And, he mentioned it, but I see it in my own work now. Like I've kind of developed my own look now.
Can you see the joy in your work or the stress that was there before or the different subjects? The difference in all those things.
Well,
I could picture that. Let's say something looked avant-garde before, but that's because you were stressed and trying to keep calm.
Right.
And now things may be, and I don't know, but maybe they're softer because you're more joyful and you can allow it to flow more easily.
Creatively. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, that's pretty wonderful. Well, you have had some kind of year in this pandemic, haven't you?
It has been very interesting, and the experience of when COVID first happened a year ago, I was still at the clinic that I was running, and nobody had ever had the experience of leading a team through a pandemic like this.
Right.
So, that experience, although super stressful and scary, it was really an amazing experience. I mean, the company that I was working for before really stepped up, treated the employees amazingly, gave us the tools and everything that we needed. So, being in a leadership position during that circumstance
Mm-hmm.
obviously was very stressful, but an amazing learning experience. And, the company was very supportive. Um, and, and the new company's been great too, as far, as these large healthcare companies really just trying to make this, it's new
It's
for
interesting.
everybody.
We think of large companies, particularly health companies, as just looking to make the dollar and do this and do that. And they're in a business, so making
It
money
is a
is part of it.
business.
But
Right.
many, many companies have shown themselves and their employees and the world, so to speak, that they understand we're all humans and there's important things here to provide.
Yep.
Whether it's new training or being open to how differently creatively we can take care of the client or PPE or whatever it is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. And realizing, supporting us, the ones that are, you see the news, you see how many places are not doing that for their nurses. I've really been lucky. The two companies that I've been with
Right.
since the pandemic started have been stellar in
That's terrific.
getting us what we need to do our job successfully.
How I can only imagine, not only does it inform your photography influence, but it informs the work that you do now as a case manager.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a caring nurse and person, but having been through so much stress and tension and the pandemic, you come to a place to be have maybe a little more humanity, which is, I guess, what I hope we all get as we age. I mean,
Yep.
there should be a good reason that body parts start to ache. We should be.
Right.
That's absolutely terrific.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
so I mean, I've definitely been blessed in my career. I mean, my decision to leave that leadership position, like I said, was not an easy one to make because the company was great. I loved the people that I worked with. It was just, it took me a long time to kind of work through and figure out and let myself be okay with stepping out of that. Like you said before, I had climbed to this point and was making this money and had this title. It took me a while to convince myself that it was okay to do something different.
Well, it's interesting that when we think, well, years ago, what do I want to be when I grow up? Well, it was some kind of something that would lead to uh, a decent amount of money or a good pension or security or
Right.
travel, whatever was important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, without thinking about it, we equated that with being happy, content, and satisfied.
Right.
Right. And obviously, one's got nothing to do, well, it has something to do with it, but one doesn't ensure the other.
Right.
Right. Right. And once you get into it and go to college and get trained and, go along the path, you get to a place in life and like, wait a minute, really, is this all there is? I'm at the place that I've been striving for all these years, and I'm hollow inside. I might
Right.
have some shekels in my pocket, and my resume looks good, And I know I
Right.
have this position, but I can see this isn't enough. It's a great shell. Right,
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So you want to be able to feed all the different parts of you, whether it's your spirit or your brain or your belly. Well, you got to feed them all, you know?
Yeah.
Fascinating. So
Yeah.
what gives you hope for the future?
You know, I just in the field that I'm in, I work with people who, you know, nursing is a career, but you're not going to be successful in nursing if you are not the right kind of person. Yes, I get paid to take care of people, but I would be doing it anyway. I do it anyway. That's just, it's my nature. And I feel like, there are plenty of nurses out there who get into it for the money. You can pick them out of a crowd real fast. Most of the times they're not successful at being a nurse. But I've seen, so especially just in the last year, outside of my profession, people just stepping up and trying to ease this for whoever they can. Um, and that gives me hope. I have friends who are raising kids right now. I don't have children. I have a dog. She's laying here on the dog bed.
And
you
what's the
know,
dog's
my
name?
what was that?
What's the dog's name?
Maggie May.
Hi, Maggie May. Boy,
And
she must.
she
Maggie May must have been a big help during the pandemic and stressful times and others.
absolutely, my whole, the whole 9 years I've had her, I mean, she really, they say your dog's your best friend. She really is my best friend. But I don't have kids. I'm not married. I made those choices throughout, my life because I like my independence. I like feeling like I can pick up tomorrow and move to California if I want,
You
or
just have to consult with Maggie. If she's in, you're good.
right. But I have a lot of friends that do have children right now, and between the political climate for a while and COVID, I felt what that was doing to me, and I kept thinking, like, I couldn't even imagine if I had to
Right.
try to raise a child through this right now. But I see the amazing things my friends, some of which you probably know, just doing such an amazing job with.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's
And
the hardest of times and the best of times.
right, our hope is the kids. They're the future. They're my hope. Like, I hope that somebody raises a cool kid who's going to take care of me when I'm old.
Let me write this down. She wants someone to take care of her when she's all right. I'm putting the slip in for you now. I'm looking for the cool kid. It's
And it's been a rough few years,
right.
and that gives me hope that there are still really just awesome people out there, caring people who are just raising their kids to move that forward.
Wonderful. And you know what? Your words today are going to give other people hope.
I hope so.
There's a nurse or a janitor or a mechanical engineer or somebody out there who's going to resonate with part or all of your story. And they're going to have had times in their life that left brain and right brain, it was like juggling, and it felt like maybe they were always dropping one,
Disconnected. Yep.
Sure. And maybe they're in the medical field or other helping fields. But you were so honest about how difficult this has been and what you did to address it. And isn't that wonderful that that could be hope for others?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would love so much for people to be able to connect with your photography. Is there a place they could go to see the photos?
Sure. I have a Facebook, at first I was just kind of throwing my photos up on my own Facebook page. And I did create my own Facebook page specifically for my photography now. So it's my Soul Shines Photography.
Very good. Good. We'll
And
make sure that we have that up there.
Yeah, great. I'd love for people to be able to check some of my stuff out and see the progression.
Absolutely. Because part of my reason for the podcast is people's stories and what gives them hope for the future, how difficult it's been. But also, I'm so interested in people's stories.
Yeah.
Times in the past, wars, other traumatic events, we know the facts of the events. But we don't often hear the stories. So when people say, yeah, well, we got through World War I and II, we'll get through this. Well, that's true enough. But what if I spoke to somebody in the middle of the war and she was the woman left home, or he was the guy who had flat feet and couldn't go abroad, or you were the soldier, right? That's what I'm hoping to archive here, are stories about how all of us ordinary individual people have stepped up and have done extraordinary things, whether the pandemic's been horrible for you or good for you, or usually some mixture.
Both.
Right.
Sure, both.
Absolutely.
It's been scary. It's been scary as a nurse. It's been scary as a daughter. I have two parents in their, early 70s. My dad is a cancer survivor. He actually did have COVID. Worrying about my patients, worrying about my family and friends, and of course, but it kind of makes me, I think a lot of that pressure on top of my normal stress and that I was dealing with at work, that all became the catalyst for me to finally make the change. So like I said, I feel more content and relaxed and happy and more like myself now than I have in years.
Amazing.
And unfortunately, it's took this very unfortunate, scary event.
But you've said something really important here. When I'm doing grief work, which is all part of what this is,
right,
is that we're forced or allowed, you can pick your verb, how you're feeling, to make changes in our life because of a loss, whether it's a person, a pet, a job, a lifestyle, whatever it is. And if we could have made the choice with Mai Tais on the beach, we would have.
Right.
But that's not how those kinds of changes come. Like you said,
right.
This was the catalyst to make the change. Well, those weren't all good things. That was the catalyst. No,
Right.
but that's how these things happen,
Yeah.
And so I think I've been really researching and talking about how this pandemic and our response to it mirrors the grief process and how we're processing things. And because it's all individual, all of this is individual. And so that's where the name of the series came from, because it's the same storm, but different boats. Somebody's got a leaky canoe and somebody has a kayak. I imagine somebody has a yacht. I just don't know who it is, So much, Mary. This has been such an interesting interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, people are interested first in the nursing profession and how
sure, especially right now.
Right. And also the difficulties of it, and how you address them and where you've come to today. So please accept my thanks, Mary, for joining me on my podcast, From Heartache to Healing and Hope. Same storm, different boats.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.